Hi guys, Kaiser here. The AoE devs have just released a new patch update preview, or PUP, for Age of Empires 3. And so this is a kind of a schematic of what is going to be changing in the game later this month. So I figured I'd go ahead and read through it and react. This is coming out just in time, by the way, for our very own Age of Empires 3 Noob Cup. If you missed the last video, we're hosting a tournament on this channel for players who have never played Age of Empires 3 online before, or players who are lower on the ladder and not necessarily the most skilled players who've ever played the game. And so if that sounds like a lot of fun to you, check out the Discord link in the description below. We're doing signups right now, and we need people to sign up and join. So definitely give it a shot. We'd love to have you joining us. Anyway, let's go and dive in here. Starting with the general updates, the Bosniak unit removed the unit promotion feature and damage multiplier against shock infantry. Now that's really interesting. I've not heard a lot about the Bosniak being an overtuned unit. And, you know, when the Knights of the Mediterranean expansion came out and they introduced all of these European units, one of the things that we saw in most of those the native camps is this unit promotion feature. They put that on almost all of the units. So I'm really surprised to see them removed from the Bosniak. I wonder why. I don't know the reason. Now, I have heard that the Giant Grenadier is pretty strong. Area of effect damage means a lot because you're not only damaging the target unit, but you're damaging the surrounding units as well. So I've heard that they were pretty strong. They took 6 points reduced damage now, down from 42 to 36 range damage. That makes sense based on what I've been reading. Likewise, the Grenadier unit now has a negative melee attack multiplier of 0.15 against shock infantry. Wow. Okay, so they're going to be way more effective now, shock infantry against Grenadiers. The Brazilian Revolution. The Guard of Honor and the Legendary Native Warriors card now properly cost a shipment each. Huh. Now, you may remember I focused on the Brazilians recently in one of my AoE videos, and at the end of that video, I had so many shipments. And I was wondering why I'm not always on top of my home city like I should be, but it seemed too much. And now I'm wondering if I shipped one or both of these and just it didn't actually cost a shipment. Well, all right, that's a bug fix. Glad to have that there. 2 bank wagons for the South African Revolution. Bank build limit increased by 2 from 1. That makes a lot of sense. There are a couple of cards where they'll ship X amount, like they'll ship 2 banks, but they'll only increase the build limit by 1, so you might be left with this extra, bank wagon or whatever just sitting there. And so it's nice that they've actually, I won't say fixed it. They probably intended that originally, but it's good that that's now 2 for 2. 2 build spots, 2 wagons. All right. Now, I have read that there are 4 civilizations in the game that currently are dominating the ladder. The Chinese, the Indians, the Portuguese, and the Swedes. And we'll go through those here. First, we've got the Chinese, and they've received a single nerf here. Their T-Export card. Or is that a tech? I forget, actually. I don't play a lot of Chinese. T-Export. The export trickle reduced to 2.35 export per second, down from 0.4. So a 0.05 per second reduction to export trickle. And export, of course, for Asian civs is basically almost like a second home city, right? You're sacrificing part of your eco in order to gather this extra resource that you can spend on new units, new techs. So that will hurt the Chinese a little bit, but I'd say that's a rather gentle touch to the Chinese game plan and play style. The French, and it says the French, but when you actually read through these, what they're really talking about is the French Revolution that they introduced in the most recent patch. They've updated a bunch of things here. First, we've got the Aerostatic Core in Age 4, which I believe is a card. And it says, no longer sends an advanced hot air balloon. Now, I am not entirely sure, because the Aerostatic Core tech only, like, that's what it does, is it sends a hot air balloon, and it enables your explorer to ship it out, that kind of thing. So the only thing I guess this means is you're sending a regular hot air balloon instead of an advanced one now, if I'm understanding that right. The regular one is actually better in a lot of ways. It moves faster and it sees more, but it has a time limit to it, whereas the advanced one stays in the air permanently. So that's basically the difference there. The advanced hot air balloon is a permanent feature for your army. That's not being reduced, I guess, to more like an ability that you can spawn in intermittently. The French Revolution now also activates the Edict of Nantes card to enable Grenadier training in the church. That's pretty cool because it means if you go for the French Revolution, that's one less card that you need to ship before the Revolution. Grenadier training for the French, with that latest patch, they have a bunch of new unique French technologies for the Grenadiers, so not requiring that card before going to the French Revolution. Pretty nice. The Napoleonic Era. This is a home city card that you can send after revolting in the French Revolution that basically is a revolt within a revolt, unlocking Napoleonic Era France. And it used to cost 1,789 food, 1,804 wood, and 1,815 coin. Those prices were referencing three different dates. 1789, the start of the French Revolution, 1804, the coronation of Napoleon, and 1815, the abdication of Napoleon. So, what I gather, they chose those prices as a historical wink and a nod, and not, I'm imagining, in order to be competitively viable, or at least sort of the competitive cost was not on their mind when they chose those prices. That's a fun historical wink and a nod. Well, now the coronation of Napoleon has been knocked out, and we just have two costs now: 1,789 food, 1,815 coin. From a gameplay perspective, it makes a lot of sense to do this. Wood is perhaps the slowest gathering resource, so it's going to be a lot easier to actually go into the Napoleonic era. It's a good choice in that sense. On the other hand, I'm actually surprised that it's the wood cost that they... Well, I'm not surprised they removed wood, but I'm surprised they didn't change the food cost to 1804. I figured, all right, the coronation of Napoleon, the abdication of Napoleon, that's the Napoleonic era, right? But they decided to say go from the start of the revolution to the abdication of Napoleon. So a nice buff for that period. Speaking of buffs, Sister Republics. This is another home city card for the French that ships, I think it's 15 if I remember right, 15 random European civilization units. So those native camp shipments like House of Brandenburg or House of Oldenburg or something like that, right? It grabs 10 or 15 random ones and ships them to you. That used to cost 1,500 food. That's now down to 1,000 food. So a lot easier to pick that up. The 100 Days, another home city card if I'm not mistaken, now takes 60 seconds to arrive from 40 seconds. Okay, good deal. And the Sans-Culotte, which is the French Revolution villager. The initial gather rate for wood has been changed to 0.5 wood per second and 0.66 coin per second, up from 0.4 wood per second and 0.5 coin per second. So the economy that you're now building this French Revolution behind is going to be a lot stronger. So I think these numbers add up over time. That's fairly significant. So pretty nice buffs all around for the French. A few nerfs, I guess, like 100 Days, but I don't think that's the biggest thing in the world. Overall, pretty solid buff for the French. The Germans. Not a whole lot going on here. Higher Pandours, that was a mercenary card, and it used to cost 500 coin. It now costs 1,000 coin. Wow. So the cost has doubled. And that means it's going to be a lot harder to use that unit. Now, someone else, maybe someone who knows the game better, can leave a comment below as to whether, is the Pandours card still worth it? Was the card so strong that it had to be nerfed this significantly? Because that's a 100% cost increase, right? So That's interesting. That must have been a very strong card. I didn't play a lot with the Pandora's card, so I must have missed out. And then Mercenary Camps, kind of a bug fix, now delivers 3 Ulans as intended, which is pretty good. I did some experimenting with the Mercenary Camps card, and haven't yet kind of figured out the key to that play style. And maybe part of the reason why I wasn't getting the 3 Ulans, so maybe that'll help. All right, second OP Civ number 2 here, the Indians. Another, I think, relatively small nerf to them. Damage improvement for elephants reduced to 15%, down from 20%. So again, kind of like with the Grenadiers, we're talking about a reduction to area of effect damage. When the Indian elephants attack, they're not only attacking the unit in front of them, but they're doing splash damage to units around them, and so that's being reduced as well. Good for them. I don't know. Kind of like with the Chinese. I'm not as familiar with the Chinese and the Indians as far as how are they dominating the latter. How are they strong? So maybe that indicates that they're maybe not the most OP civilizations, and therefore the nerfs have been relatively minor to them. For the Italians, this is pretty cool. A really solid late game buff for them. The Imperial Bersaglieri. They have corrected the armor bonus to 5% ranged armor, up from 0.5%. So I'm guessing that was a typo, and this is a bug fix here, and that's really, really big. The Bersaglieri is a unit that is not available until the 4th Age, right? And so it's very hard to mass up these units in the first place. And if you're going to introduce a unit that's not available until Age 4, then it better be pretty strong, right? Here, having only a 0.5% ranged resist, that was obviously making them much weaker than they were supposed to be. So bringing their range resist up to 5 will be very helpful and actually making this unit, this upgrade, worth it in Age 5. I said the unit itself is available in Age 4, but the tech is available in Age 5. Anyway, glad to see that fixed. Red shirts, Age 4 no longer affects the entire team. Okay. Lakota. Cooperation. Now, I don't know a lot about the Lakota. Now correctly costs 250 food and 250 wood, and lowers the cost of support cards by 25% as intended, up from 15%. Okay, great. 3 Axe Riders, revert unit count to 4 from 3. Okay, so this is now going to be 4 Axe Riders. 5 Club Warriors, reverted unit count to 6 from 5. Okay, so buffs there. You're getting 1 more Axe Rider, 1 more Club Warrior with those cards. Team Great Lakes now correctly reduces the cost of the legendary warboats, improved cordage, and river raids technologies in the Native American docks. The only thing I have to say about that, which is funny, I was reading on the forums that apparently the Lakota don't really have any kind of relationship to the Great Lakes. That's more of a Haudenosaunee thing. So it's kind of funny to see the Team Great Lakes card here, but I'm guessing, I believe that's a card that both civilizations have, and so the Lakota are kind of piggybacking off of the Haudenosaunee card. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. The Ottomans. Now, the Ottomans were recently reworked, and so they look pretty strong, and they're going to take a couple of nerfs to a few of their units. The Azap, if I'm pronouncing that right, or the Azap, is sort of a ranged spearman unit. It's a spearman unit that also has a bow, and so it's, in a lot of ways, it's a lot more effective than your typical pikeman or spearman is in, the early game. So they've been considered very strong. We see that their ranged damage has been reduced to 6 from 8, which I interpret to mean that they're not going to be nearly as effective as an all-around unit, every shot doing 2 less damage. The bonus, of course, that they get to cavalry will still be very strong, but you're not going to be able to use it as effectively as an all-around kind of unit. And then, this one's big, melee resistance flipped to ranged resistance. Now, I find that really interesting because that means that they're actually going to absorb damage from crossbows and skirmishers more effectively than they used to, or of course, musketeers as well. Really interesting there. So that might actually, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. They're going to be doing less damage, but I think a lot of what you would consider the typical counter to the Azap, they'll actually resist those unit damages more. Especially because the Azap does not count as a light infantry unit, so you're not getting bonus damage from that armor, that class. And they also don't count as hand infantry either. So anything that specifically targets those kind of units, that's interesting. But it does mean they don't have melee resistance anymore. So if you had a whole bunch of cavalry, like heavy cav, yes, the Azap will be doing bonus damage to the cav, but the cav will be getting more hits in against the Azap. And of course, if you can actually get swordsmen on the Azap or pikemen of your own, well, that means that they'll be doing the full damage. So, interesting. The Delhi, now this is the unit I think most people have considered OP. It is a hussar-like unit that was very fast, was able to raid indiscriminately, and could just blow up a lot of things, and get in and out, blitzkrieg style. So here with the Delhi, we see that their attack speed has been slowed down to 1.2 attack per... Well, it's one attack for every 1.2 seconds, down from one attack every second, right? So what that means is, in a 6-second time period, the old Delhis were getting in 6 attack, the new Delhis will be getting in 5. So it's not they're slower in their attack. They're not able to nuke units quite as quickly as they used to, right? The movement speed has also been tweaked ever so slightly, down to 6.8 from 6.9. So they're not able to move around quite as fast, bring that a little more in line with other cav units. They're attacking not quite as fast. A small buff to them, though, they have 5 more HP, from 310 to 315. So they'll be able to take a little bit more punishment, but they won't be able to move and attack quite as fast as they used to. And then the Nizam Fusilier, which is a fascinating unit because it is like a blend of a musketeer and a skirmisher. It's just a better unit all around from the Janissary, if I remember correctly. And so one of the strongest infantry units in the game, and it got a little bit of a hit from the nerf bat here. Unit no longer benefits from counter infantry rifling. That is huge. Now the blacksmith, or I forget what it's called. I'm calling it the blacksmith. In Age of Empires 3 does not work like the blacksmith in Age of Empires 2. It's not as necessary over the ages, but there are 1 or 2 techs, depending on your particular strategy, that you definitely want to pick up. And in the case of any kind of skirmisher unit, you need to pick up counter infantry rifling because it makes the skirmishers, by orders of magnitude, more effective against heavy infantry units. Skirmishers melt musketeers way more effectively with counter infantry rifling. The fact that the Nizam Fusiliers used to get that tech means Nizam Fusiliers used to, again, perfectly fill that function of a skirmisher as well as a musketeer. Well, the fact that they lose sight of this means they aren't going to be nearly as effective in that sort of skirmisher role. They are going to be much more focused in, I think, on the musketeer side of things. Melee damage multiplier against cavalry increased up to 3 times damage, up from 2.5, to match the strengths of the musketeer. So again, it's going to be focused in a little more heavily on the musketeer side, kind of a super Janissary, right? Focused in on the musketeer side, not going to be as good of an all-around unit. It's almost like what we're seeing with the Azap. Both of these units used to be pretty good all-around units. They're being focused in more into a particular role. So the Nizam, focusing in on that musketeer side. If you want a skirmisher, you're going to be looking at the Abus gun, right? The Nizam Fusilier units and shipments now respect a build limit of 20, up from 15, so that's a nice buff for them. Janissary shipments now properly respect the available pop space. Levy, fix an error that allowed Ottomans access to a second levy ability spawning militiamen when starting a game in the post-industrial post-period age. So a bug fix there. Nice to get that fixed. All right. The Portuguese. Now, this is one of the civilizations that has definitely caused a stir. I have featured them on the channel, and it was a new card that was added, one of the coolest cards in the game. Definitely gave the Portuguese a unique flavor, but some people thought it was a little too strong, and the devs agreed. The Feitoria card, which gives all Portuguese town centers a trickle of resources, including XP, well, Feitorias now will bring in 50% less resources. 50% fewer resources, and that is a really significant nerf to them. Now, I don't have numbers in front of me, but just imagining that in the amount of time that it used to take Feitorias to bring in, say, 100 food, now it'll only bring in 50. It takes twice as long to get the resources you used to get. That's a significant nerf to the Portuguese. And it wouldn't surprise me to see this number jump up and down a little bit over the next few patches. I've heard some people suggest that, the Feitorias card wasn't really that strong in Age 1, and they were advocating that it not be nerfed. And other people saying, yes, it definitely should be nerfed, but maybe not nerfed quite this hard. And other people saying it's definitely the right nerf. And so I'm sure there'll be interesting debate on this, and maybe you can leave a comment below. What do you think about the Feitorias card? Is this the right nerf for them? Because the Portuguese have for the longest while been at the bottom of many tier lists, and Feitorias was definitely the shot in the arm they needed, but maybe it was too strong. Obviously, that's what the devs thought, so we'll see how that pans out. For the Russians, Sovnya. Melee damage improvement for Streltsy reduced to 4, down from 10. Yeah, that makes sense. The Streltsy is a skirmisher unit that it's weak, but you can mass it up very easily. And once you pick up Sovnya, well, now they also have a really strong melee attack, which is not what you expect from a skirmisher unit. So it makes sense to me that reducing this improvement down to only +4, because you have so many of them, these numbers add up pretty quickly, right? Economic theory in H1 added to the home city. That's nice. That's nice. Gives them some early game trickle, which would be pretty cool. The Spanish get a small bug fix. Now adds the appropriate amount of +330 coin instead of 300 coin to the Exploration Age cards after aging up with the Logistician Politicians. So a nice bonus for them. Pretty cool. And here we go. The final civ that was considered way too strong. I think this was probably the #1 civ considered OP, the Swedes, and it was all about the Hakkapellet. The Hakkapellet is now, it's a light cavalry unit, right? So light cav, of course, counters heavy cav and artillery. And what they did is, it's a light cav unit, but it also has a pretty strong melee attack. And at the time, when they first made this change, the Hakkapellet's melee attack was good against almost everything. It was hard to beat a swarm of Hakkapellet. So I've heard, anyway. Well, they've clearly been taking some hits here with this patch in order to try to make the Hakkapellet more kind of more in line with the light cav and focusing in on their strengths and weaknesses. So they've taken a hit to their HP. They only now have a max of 210 HP, down from 240 HP. Their melee damage has been reduced to 22, down from 30. So, to my understanding, that's probably still not half bad, but that's a pretty significant hit. I mean, 8 points of damage, that's nearly near 25% of 30. So 25% reduced damage down to 22 from 30. That's a pretty sizable nerf. So I don't think they'll be as strong in the melee department, and that all around just swords out and attack everything, right? You don't get that anymore. The melee damage multiplier now applies to heavy cavalry instead of all cavalry. And this is huge because they get, as light cav, they get bonus damage against heavy cavalry, and they're also decent against other light cav. Well, that melee damage multiplier used to apply to all cavalry, so you could just massive Hakkapellet, swords out, and you're wiping out artillery and heavy cav and light cav, and you're probably overwhelming skirms. And I don't know, just what I've heard is they were pretty unstoppable. So now, if you as an opponent mass up light cav of your own, you don't have to worry about their melee damage multiplier affecting you. So that's nice. And you now have added melee damage multiplier of 0.6. Now, if I understand this correctly, and someone correct me if I'm wrong on this, because this is pretty important. I believe this is actually a nerf. What they're saying is that you will do 0.6 melee damage against infantry and villagers. So, no melee damage multiplier against light cav, and reduced melee damage against infantry and villagers. You would only want to go into melee mode against heavy cav or artillery, which are the units light cav are supposed to be countering in the first place. And then, of course, you have reduced melee damage as a whole. So, pretty significant hits to their melee. And that means that, if I remember right, that's sort of the unique function of the Hakapela anyways. They have pretty strong melee. So, they've got that option still, but it's no longer nearly as good of an all-around strategy as it used to be. So, that's pretty interesting. All right, good for them. March of the Hakapelets. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right, by the way. I'm sure someone will tell me I'm pronouncing that wrong. But the Hakapelet, their speed increase is reduced to 0.15, down from 0.25. All right, so you're not going to be nearly as fast as you used to be. And then Contract Irish Brigadiers, a small buff in a sea of nerfs, sends 9 Irish Brigadiers up from 8 and is now available in Age 2 as intended. The Swedes are one of the civilizations that have very strong mercenary options, so this is a nice little buff for them to see. That they're able to get out one more unit, and it is available in Age 2, which I forget if it was Age 1 or Age 3 that it used to be in, but now it's in the appropriate age. That makes sense. So that's what they've signaled so far here in the PUP. What do you think? I want to hear from you in the comments below. Do you think that these nerfs and buffs are enough? What do you think is missing from this update? What do you want to see in the future? Let me know in the comments below. And again, if you're interested in checking out the Noob Cup, join our server and sign up. You can join the server and check out more info on what's coming down the pike. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I need people to sign up. So go ahead and join that server. For now, guys, this is the Iron Kaiser signing off.